It is natural for a human being to try to make sense of the individual things and phenomena that surround them. People have always wanted to learn how to predict different events, understand the nature of things, and grasp the essence and the design of the heavens. In addition, people have always wondered about their place in the universe. And to find themselves in those earliest times, humans were forced to believe in various mythological elements that filled nature. Because otherwise, how could they, for example, make sense of how the sun moves around the earth and warms it? Everything that was within their power, within their understanding, and within reach of their simple, at first glance tools, was far too imperfect and unripe to allow them to understand the true nature and essence of, for instance, the celestial bodies. The simplest thing for people was to believe that these were simply gods who governed day and night, who could send rain and sunshine, and whom one absolutely had to please. Despite all of this, today we can study various archaeological findings that show that knowledge of the motion of astronomical objects in ancient times was, at first glance, not as primitive as it might seem. People back then invented a complex device for measuring the movement of celestial bodies, which allowed them to understand that there are specific cycles according to which, for example, they could predict when to sow one crop or another. It turned out that one of the most popular and partially preserved astronomical instruments of this kind is Stonehenge. Why was astronomy needed in the Stone Age? Who was it and when that discovered the astronomical functions of Stonehenge? How are you even supposed to use such a device? And does any of this have anything at all to do with extraterrestrials? So let us figure this out together. Why did a person of the Stone Age even need astronomy in the first place? It is essential to understand that in the way we think of it today, there was no such science as astronomy back then. And the general knowledge people had about celestial bodies could not really be reduced to a single science. Overall, you could call it something like astronomy plus religion plus philosophy. Their system of knowledge consisted of certain beliefs, traditions, and empirical experience, trying to preserve and pass on to the next generations all the knowledge they had gained about beliefs, the structure of the world, and their observations. Ancient people recorded and immortalized all of this on different structures, temples, buildings, graves, and on stones or bones. The archaeological monuments found generally attest to the high level of astronomical knowledge possessed by people of that time. This is evidenced by the way specific structures are oriented toward the points of sunrise and sunset on the days of the equinoxes or the solstices. Even today, we still keep the tradition of building temples with the altar facing the sunrise. In different parts of the world, archaeologists find cromlechs, rings of menhirs, long sighting stones that ancient people used as places of worship for the gods, gathering spots, ritual sites, and tools for observing the celestial bodies. Humans noticed long ago that the sun follows specific cycles, and based on this, the very first calendar was created. The same goes for the moon, its changing phases, and the shifting points of its rising and setting. All of this allowed ancient people to create solar and lunar calendars, which they could use both for agricultural and religious purposes. The ability to predict the movements of the heavenly bodies was also essential for astrology. Our ancestors recorded the sunrises and sunsets of the sun on the days of the solstices, thereby marking the beginning and the end of the annual cycle. They connected the events of celestial bodies on the heavenly sphere with something divine, and, in this way, could believe the predictions the gods supposedly gave them. Of course, for ancient people, there could not even be any talk of telescopes or other complex astronomical instruments that would help them determine different astronomical events, or more generally, understand the nature of astronomical phenomena. They almost certainly did not even have simple angle measuring tools. Everything within their reach was to make simple stone instruments. But as it turned out, that was enough for them. In addition, the horizon itself played an important role in observation. With its help, they could mark the places where celestial bodies rose and set. By using a single high mountain observation point, they could, over the course of a whole yearly cycle, record the positions of the sun's or the moon's rising and setting, and based on that, draw certain conclusions about their motion. The largest celestial bodies in the sky, the sun and the moon, attracted people with their grandeur and their cyclical changes. The cyclical rising and setting of the sun, which shifts its position from the summer solstice to the winter solstice, prompted the emergence of a solar calendar, and the changing phases of the moon led to a lunar calendar. These two celestial bodies were the only ones truly available for consistent observation to ancient people, because they were large and their changes were significant, unlike those of the planets or the stars. In addition, Paleolithic people could observe solar and lunar eclipses. According to research, it has become clear that they could be predicted and, of course, used for religious and ritual purposes, since people at that time could only make assumptions about their divine origin. All of this led to the need to build specialized structures to record various astronomical events. One of these structures was the Stonehenge Observatory. In Great Britain, near the city of Salisbury, not far from London, in the middle of a valley, stands the majestic and well-known Cromlech of Stonehenge. Translated, its name means hanging stones. This megalith, made of stone blocks, each with a mass of about 40 tons and a height of more than 6 meters, forms a circle that could have been used as a kind of astronomical instrument. Of course, as mentioned above, this complex was used not only for observation, but also for religious rituals, burials, and even for healing. At first, scholars believed this site was simply a place of pagan worship. Still, at the beginning of the 20th century, the English astronomer Norman Lockyer gave Stonehenge a new title, an astronomical observatory. Naturally, this sparked not only a wave of excitement and new ideas, but also a great deal of dissatisfaction and indignation. Many people criticized the scientists' work. However, in the 1960s, Gerald Hawkins presented even more evidence that Stonehenge was used as an observatory. The directions of the marker stones, the menhirs, matched the locations of sunrise and sunset for the sun and the moon on the dates of the solstices and equinoxes. In this way, people could measure time and create an accurate solar calendar. This is how the hypothesis arose that this complex was also used to calculate and predict the dates of solar and lunar eclipses. All around the Cromlech are scattered solitary burial mounds, graves that, as it later turned out, can also serve as corresponding sighting markers. The azimuths of these graves coincide with the azimuths of the sunrise and sunset points of the sun and the moon on the days of the solstices and the equinoxes. In addition to the stones and graves, there are earthen embankments and ditches around the Cromlech, which also served as sighting markers and for marking the rising and setting of celestial bodies. On the rings around the Cromlech, some of the pits could be used to record the position of the line of nodes of the moon's orbit relative to the sun. In contrast, others could be used to mark the phases of the moon. In this way, Stonehenge proved to be a complex device for observing, recording, and predicting various astronomical events. Despite all of this, there are also opinions from other scholars who claim that people did not actually build Stonehenge at all, and that the stone boulders were carried into England by a glacier. The stone circles themselves, their layering and arrangement, are explained as the result of repeated freezing and thawing of permafrost during the glacial period. The astronomically significant placement of the stones, their symmetry, and their geometry are dismissed as a bizarre coincidence. Many people believe that the construction of the complex itself is far too complicated for ancient builders. There are countless theories about how Stonehenge was built, and some of them are literally of non-earthly origin. However, in the Stone Age, people were already skilled in working stone. Of course, it took a great deal of time, and the Cromlech itself was built over many centuries. The rocks were first transported to the site where they were to be erected. Pits were dug, and with the help of thick wooden logs, the stones were raised into a vertical position, and the ground around them was packed down. Researchers believe that the horizontal stone lintels were also installed using stacks of logs and earthen ramps. To this day, there are conspiracy theories and myths about how this megalith came to be. But if we look closely, we cannot really consider the people of the Stone Age to be clumsy or unintelligent. With simple tools and their minds, they managed to build such a gigantic structure and even give it a practical astronomical purpose. All of this speaks to a particular worldview, the fact that these people were curious about the nature of things and celestial bodies. This is also confirmed by numerous archaeological finds bearing astronomical symbols, such as constellations, phases of the moon, and other cosmic phenomena. Human interest in studying the sky was far from an isolated phenomenon, because similar cromlechs have been found all over the world, with similar properties and uses. Different cultures used different materials, but the basic working principle remained the same. People even left traces of astronomy inside burial mounds. In some places, they used these mounds themselves as astronomical instruments. For example, in Ukraine, near the village of Bezvodivka in the Chernihiv region, a historian and local researcher, Oleksandr Klikavka, discovered the astronomical purpose of regional groups of burial mounds. Near Bezvodivka, dozens of mounds have various shapes and are situated in rather unusual positions in the landscape. In some cases, the distance between them is several kilometers. The height of the mounds and platforms ranges from 6 to 8 meters, and their diameters can reach up to about 40 meters. There are also embankments, ditches, and other earthen formations scattered around, which together once formed a near-horizon observatory. Its operating principle is similar to that of Stonehenge. On specific astronomical dates, such as the solstices and equinoxes, the sun and the moon rise over specific burial mounds and platforms. The orientation of all the mounds relative to the azimuths is quite precise. For example, if you observe from the center of the complex on the day of the winter solstice, the sun sets behind the southwestern mound, which is located at a distance of more than 4 kilometers. This significant distance speaks to the high accuracy of the mound's placement. At this distance, the diameter of the mound's tops matches the apparent diameters of the disks of the sun and the moon. Around the complex, there are both near and distant mounds, which may seem strange at first. However, the ratios of the distances between the mounds are multiples of a whole number, or in some cases of the number phi, approximately 1.618, the Fibonacci or golden ratio, and the number pi, approximately 3.14. At Bezvodivka, people observed not only solar events, but also lunar ones. For example, the moon rises over one of the mounds at the end of the period, during which its rising point shifts along the small Saros, a cycle with a period of 18 years. Since this is the largest mound in the area, they attached great importance to this event. After this discovery, it was noticed that most mound groups throughout Ukraine have a similar arrangement. I got so interested in this that I myself, in a nearby village, found several graves that were geographically oriented toward the points of sunrise and sunset on the days of the solstices. Archaeologists view this very skeptically and consider it either a pure coincidence or of the devil. Nevertheless, you can check out Oleksandr Klikavka's research by following the links in the description or by watching a few videos on his channel. And of course, subscribe. This is not an advertisement. All of these and other mound complexes show that the knowledge ancient people had about astronomy was not as primitive as some might think. The presence of astronomical signs in their structures and graves is connected with their familiarity with the starry sky. This knowledge could shape their worldview and beliefs, help them in practical matters, and unite them as a community. Stonehenge is an ancient observatory, a temple, and a gathering place for people to observe astronomical objects and conduct various religious rituals, and not an airport for alien spacecraft. People needed astronomy both as a spiritual foundation and for practical purposes, such as solar and lunar calendars. Our goal today is above all to study and preserve these archaeological monuments, so that future generations can understand how and with what tools our ancestors practiced astronomy. That is all for now. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.